before we get there, I want to kind of talk about the Nexus Pixel history. I'm currently writing about that now on my website, thenexup.com. I'm kind of chronicling the years of what led us up to the Pixel phones. And right now, I did the first four phones: the Nexus 1, the Nexus S, the Galaxy Nexus, and ended with the Nexus 4. And I want to talk about, kind of what I learned from just going through those first four Nexus phones. Now, when I first started, especially I started writing about the Nexus 1, I kind of got a wake-up call, because I've always held the Nexus 1 as this phone, like, this is the phone that Google need to reach to, need to get back to, and need to, focus on being like, because I always thought this phone was the best phone they ever made, and at least for the period. And I didn't realize that it was plagued with bugs, issues such as 3G connectivity, Wi-Fi issues, and even touchscreen problems. And looking at that, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that, people had that issue. And having a Motorola Nexus at the time, I was thinking, man, the Nexus 1, and you look at the specs, with a bigger beast, a better phone to possibly have. But now I'm kind of glad I stuck with the Motorola Nexus, I'm not Motorola Nexus, the Motorola Droid. I still was able to root, still was able to enjoy it. It was a part of a much larger community of people who was using the phone. Now, as I continue to look at a number of things, as we talk about what the first four Nexus really brought to there, as much as I look at what Google may have been trying to do, and I talk about some of the shortcomings they may have had with the Nexus program in general, looking at the Nexus 1, they was kind of first to looking at an idea of changing the way you buy phones. And you look at where we were with all the other Nexus, like the Galaxy Nexus, as much as we talk about it being one of the worst Nexus for some people because of the LTE issues it had. But you look at what it brought to really technology in general. They were one of the first to Face ID. As you start to see, I say Face ID, but Face Unlock, that's what they use. You start to see Apple using Face ID, and even Google looking to go back to it. More companies getting away from the touchscreen, going back to where full facial recognition. Well, Google tried it first with Face Unlock. And then you look at the pay. I think a lot of us now are using our phones to pay for things where we can, because it's faster. It's getting better. I remember when I first started using Google Pay system, and with these NFC systems, you had to put it at the right spot. And if it wasn't, a certain distance and you didn't have it at the right angle, it literally took you longer to pay with your phone than it would have been to whip out your credit card. But now it's getting faster. Like, as soon as I unlock my phone, it recognizes it's ready to go, and I'm able to make the payment seamlessly. And you're starting to see more companies look towards a phone payment systems, even to the fact of stores are doing that, like Chick-fil-A and Walmart. So you look at something like Google Pay, Apple Pay, and Samsung Pay, all having this idea. Well, it kind of debuted with Google Nexus with the Google Wallet. And then we look at kind of more of what Google was trying to do back then. I would say, really, when you look at the first four Nexus phones and where they were at compared to the competition there, I feel in a way the Google phones then were more valuable than the Pixel phones now. And this is why I say that. So the Pixel phones are meant by Google to be, they say, a more premium phone. But outside of the camera, can you really say it's that? When you look at the first four Nexus specs-wise, it really compared to the competition, and in some cases beating the competition. Yes, the Nexus 1 had problems with, 3G connectivity and touchscreen issue, but it was their first phone. But when you look at the hardware and what they were up against, they were beating the competition. They set the standard. You look at, like I said, the Motorola Droid. A lot more people may own that, obviously because it was easier to obtain that than the Nexus 1. But specs-wise, the Nexus 1 beat them or doubled them in pretty much almost every category. I mean, we're talking about as far as in general, which you had compared to the competition. You was able to sit this phone at the top and say, this is where you hardware manufacturers need to get to. Now, you can't say that about the Pixel program. You cannot say about any Pixel phone right now. There's nothing about the Pixel outside of the camera that you could say, this is where you hardware manufacturers need to get to. And when you look at the camera, it's more of a software thing. Yeah, Google have figured out the software, and I give them credit. Software-wise, they have figured it out. But when it comes to hardware, it is totally different. It's like night and day. And yeah, I don't know what happened. Where the Pixel program is supposed to be the better program, in a way, just chronicling the first four phones, I feel like the Nexus program seemed to be doing a better job of trying to figure it out. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, the Nexus phone had its problems. It did. The Galaxy Nexus LTE issues. The first Galaxy, like I said, 3G connectivity issues. You look at the Nexus S, even though it was something that really inspired people to start picking up the Nexus phones, it when you look at the availability, it wasn't available for enough carriers for people to enjoy it. And then you get to the Nexus 4, it was a huge step back from where the Galaxy Nexus 4. Why? Because, again, more phones were going to LTE. And this phone went back to basically 3G. And for me personally, I passed on that phone because it was the same year that Samsung released the Note 2. And when you look at the specs of the Note 2, yeah, I got a phone that was a larger screen, larger display, still able to be rooted, larger battery life, and, well, guess what? Worked on LTE. And I honestly, really, and I highlighted in that article for the Nexus 4, I don't know if Google could really have done anything to really compete with Samsung that year, because Samsung was just hot that year. They had the Samsung Galaxy S3, and people were just coming off of that and anticipating the upgrade or the successor to the Note 1. And yeah, so as soon as the Note 2 came out, people was ready for it. And Samsung played it smart, where all these other manufacturers were, quote, trying to lock phones down. They were like, at the time, let's go ahead and let people come to this device, right? They knew, they played the system right, and it benefited them to, well, what you see now. Samsung is the favorite. Now, they locked the phones down now, but they already got people already onto the bandwagon. And Google had the opportunity to come back and kind of steal that, but they didn't. Now, one thing I did notice, something I did highlight onto the Nexus 4. Now, where Samsung and Google didn't really do so well with the Galaxy Nexus, and it forced Google to rely on LG for the Nexus 4. We kind of see how that pattern continued on as they relied on LG to make more and more phones. And LG actually came out and made some really good phones for Google until we got to the Pixel phones. And that's kind of where we're at now. When you look at the Pixel phones and LG, I don't know if LG is much to blame or if Google is much to blame. And I really think it's more of Google now, because I think Google could choose what they want as far as hardware. They could decide to make the hardware what they wanted. And where before I kept blaming the manufacturer, saying, well, maybe they didn't bring this. I'm blaming Google because they have the right to choose what they want. And we're seeing that because we saw with the Pixel 3a and 3a XL, they chose Samsung for the displays, proving that they could have done that at any time. So if they have a choice to decide how their phone or how they want their phone to be built, and they're choosing to short up the devices, not giving us the hardware that we should expect and demand for the price that we're paying, yeah, I really still feel that as far as the Pixel program goes, for right now, it is far below where I feel the Nexus program was back in the day. Because yes, the Nexus program had its issue, at least for the first four phones, but you could say that it was forward thinking, especially look at the Nexus 4. We talk about that being the less of the Nexus, but the glass back design, wireless charging, come on. Now we see more phones do that. And you could actually look to the Nexus phones as doing what they're supposed to do, inspiring the market. It was an inspiration. It was something worth buying into because they did add something to it that made it worth talking about. And I don't feel that is the case anymore with the Pixel phones. Yes, they get more eyes to the Pixel phones because of their advertising it and the way they're pushing it and making the camera the focus, which is smart. That's pretty much the one thing they have highlighting what they have over everybody else is their camera and beating everybody, even the competition, even the iPhone. But at this day and age, especially now that you're offering a cheaper version of the Google phones, like the Pixel 3a or something like that, what's to keep someone from saying, let me just buy an older Pixel phone and use that for the camera and buy a real phone for being a phone? If I'm going someplace I need a good camera, I'll bust out my Pixel. But for everything else, where yeah, I'm okay with what I have. I could take decent enough pictures. I may buy or save my money for a phone worth buying. And yeah, personally, I'm at that crossroad right now. As we're coming up on the next Pixel, and I'm having to make the decision: is it worth me spending my hard-earned money on the Pixel 4 XL when you look at what the competition is bringing at even either a cheaper price or as far as better overall? Especially when we continue to look at technology continue to expand. We're seeing Samsung attempt to do more and more, even like I said, to the point of falling on their faces. What people could say with the Samsung Galaxy Fold, they had a moment where they did fell on their face. But you know what? They're trying. And for me, I'm okay with that versus what I feel like Google is doing by not trying. By just throwing something out there and not giving a care whether or not it's acceptable as far as the hardware game. And yeah, I mean, looking back, we got the next couple Nexus that we'll bring this week, but we had the first 4 Nexus phones for Google. I think, overall you had a mixed bag of success, ideas that just was ahead of its time. But I think in the grand scheme of things, you look at where we are at as far as what Google was trying to do then, they had their mind and their heart was in a better focus than what it is now, I think.